Ruwa, I actually want to first thank you for coming on to Corncast and talk to my audience
Yeah.
at all. It's a wonderful thing to be able to talk to my audience. It's funny because Ruwa and I have been following each other on TikTok for like I think it's like 4 years now. It's really insane. Um, but even with that deeper familiarity, I want to start this episode by doing what I do with every single guest I've had, which is I actually want to give you the floor for like 5 uninterrupted minutes to just like let people hear your name and like what you're about for the first time and just tell them in your own words like what you're running for and why it matters right now.
Yeah, so hi y'all. I am State Representative Ruwa Roman. I currently serve as a state rep representing West Gwinnett. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Georgia, there's like Atlanta, it looks like a circle, and I joke that my district, they gave the bacon strip looking district to the Muslim representative because it honest to God looks like a bacon strip when you look at it. But I have actually been doing organizing work in Georgia for over 10 years. The first campaign I ever volunteered for was the Michelle Nunn Jason Carter campaign. Michelle Nunn was running for Senate. Jason Carter was running for governor, and they lost by almost 10 points at the time. This was 2014. And the reason I share this is because I remember very clearly that was the first time I ever went canvassing. So knocking on doors, talking to people about elections. And this was even before you had an app. Like these days, you get an app on your phone, it gives you an address, whatever. It was like sheets of paper. And we had to go back to headquarters to turn in our pages. And I was so excited. And I emphatically said, if we can build this infrastructure statewide, I really think we can turn Georgia blue. And I kid you not, that was the first time in my entire life. I was a sophomore, junior in college. First time in my life that anyone ever said, bless your heart to me. And for those not familiar, that is like a nice insult. And I took that shit very personally. And I kind of became obsessed with electoral politics and organizing generally because I'm a deep believer that what we do on the ground for each other, the mutual aid, the responses, all of that is a response. But when it comes to politics, that is meant to be one, a reflection of those responses, and two, a preventative measure. So that way we're not dealing with like a million things. It's like 900,000 things. You know what I mean? But I really became obsessed with that. And I was really lucky because this was around the time that people that I knew in my life were starting to think about, okay, like I remember looking around the room, even back then, no one looked like me. It was Atlanta, but the majority of the room was like older and white. And all I could think was, there is so much potential out there in our state. And that was around the time that Stacy started organizing. That was the time my friend Aisha Coop actually ran in the same district number. It was just redrawn. And I kind of share the story the way that it does because it's the perfect encapsulation of how Georgia changed. It was people started to look around and go, not only like who's not in the room, but who can we get in the room and how do we get them in that room? And it really kind of unleashed this idea of like coalition building in a way that we're starting to kind of see emulate all around the country. But I remember very clearly, like there was real legitimate outreach to Asian voters, right? But it was like language specific, right? Like Chinese and Korean and Vietnamese. It wasn't just Asian people, big bucket, you all fit. Even like Muslim voter outreach, there was like some complexity in how that was happening. And it was, I honestly think of it as the golden age was like from I would say 2016, which I know that's when Trump won, but if y'all look at the analysis, I think that was the smallest margin for Georgia in a presidential in a very long time because between 2016 and 2020 is when we really got our shit together. And oftentimes people point out that, well, this is Georgia. Of course, Stacey was going to lose, but Stacey lost 2018 by less than a point. It was actually around a point. And remember, Jason Carter lost by like almost 10. And then you get into 2022, by the way, where she had the smallest margin of loss against an incumbent anywhere in the country. And again, it's just like kept reinforcing that we keep trying to do this stupid playbook that doesn't work when we have unlimited opportunity to bring more voters and people to the table. And so obviously we flipped in 2020. We kept Warnock in office in 2022. And that brings us to like 2024, where me I got bullied into running for office in 2022, like truly bullied. Like my grandfather had just passed away. They had drawn the district in such a way that it was a new open seat. And I had a lot of community members sit me down and ask me to run. And I actually very explicitly told them, I cannot be your Palestinian rep. My grandfather just died. This is honest to God an open wound. Like I cannot do that. And I remember so many people sitting me down going like, you're overthinking this. This is state level government. So we're kind of like Congress on a state level. We don't do foreign affairs, but like they're like, this is state level government. Your job is going to be like education, healthcare, voting rights. And I'm like, you know what? Fine. It's really rare to get people saying, I'll commit to door knocking for you. I'll commit to fundraising for you, all of that kind of stuff. And so I couldn't really say no. And you started to see, and it was like, I also didn't want to be a hypocrite, right? We were telling people to show up to vote, telling people to like kind of do the thing. And now they're asking me to do it in return. And it just kind of got to a point where I can't say no. Launch a campaign in 15 days. And then, no joke, the year that I was inaugurated, meaning I officially took my seat, was the year that October 7th happened. And there are a total of five Palestinian elected officials on the legislative level and the congressional level. So that's Rashida Abdul Nasser in Illinois, Ayman Jude in Colorado, Sam Rasool in Virginia, and me. That's it. And I was the only person that, only Palestinian in a state where all three branches of government are controlled by Republicans and a swing state that we had flipped by 11,780 votes. That's literally about as many votes as I got in my district. And so, like, the thing I feared most and the thing that I never, like, truly, truly just could not handle, clearly I survived, but that I think is when people really got to know about me, was when all of that started happening. And then obviously everything went down to the DNC, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But like, that's who I am. And I just remember going into 2025, everyone's depressed. They're like, Trump is going to be here forever. I'm like, no, like, you're learning the wrong lessons. Like, please wake up. And our gubernatorial field started to get pretty crowded, and there was not a single person in the progressive left lane. And so that's why we launched our campaign for governor. And we were the only people, the only campaign gaining in the polls. By the end of it, had over 5,000 volunteers. But then we got a call a few weeks ago letting us know there's a super PAC coming in on behalf of Jeff Duncan. And the organizations we were building a coalition with were completely out of money. Like, all of the funding had gone to North Carolina and Texas, and there just physically was no way to maintain the infrastructure that we built as a campaign. Um, and truly within like 36 hours, we had to like figure out what we were going to do. And everyone I called was like, we honest to God can't, like, all the money's shifted. But then a lot of them had asked me to run for state senate because that is where a lot of the anti-Muslim stuff is coming out from right now. And frankly, it just, we always have to deal in the House with all the Senate stuff anyway. And so, um, yeah, that was probably the craziest. Last week was probably the craziest week of my life, like, no joke. And so now I'm running for state senate for House District 7, Senate District 7, which sits right on top of my House district. And the work isn't going to stop. Like, I'm just going to keep organizing and continuing to show people that there's a lot of opportunity here.
You know, I think that's an incredible story, Ruwa. And I think that a lot of people who are going to listen to this probably are actually not aware of like what happened at the DNC or like why that was viewed with so much disdain by Democratic voters all over the country. I think that the sort of maelstrom of 2024 really made it kind of impossible to sit with any news for longer than like 8 hours. So I actually would like you to, if you're willing to, sort of relitigate it, just to let my
Yeah.
audience know, like why were you, within the course of, honestly, I think it was like 48 hours, like elevated to a national position, like what was it?
Yeah. So just so y'all know, for context, as state house members, we have 40 legislative days spread out over the first quarter of the year. We don't have staff. Any staff I have, I actually fundraise extra to keep during the legislative session when we can't fundraise anyway. And so everything that, like, a lot of times people don't realize that unlike members of Congress who have an entirely staffed office, we don't have any of that. And so, like I said, I never expected to be like the Palestinian state rep, but it just happened again because I live in a state. Like, it was just not great. And I remember very clearly going like end of 2023, beginning of 2024 is when I knew that this was going to be a problem, right? The genocide in Gaza was going to become the thing that really moves people, because how can you not? Because for the first time, right? Like, I remember when the war in Iraq first started, when we really started to do kind of all of this um like deep, deep and violent engagement in the Middle East that has literally killed and displaced millions of people. Like, I want to remind people of this, right? Like, because this is going to be relevant about the Cheneys too, but like, Dick Cheney to a lot of these communities is a genocidal freak. Like, to be 100, like, he has killed and maimed and displaced millions of people. Many of them are our community members that we know, right? Like, people that we grew up with, people that we know. And um and so going into 2024 was different, was for the first time an American audience was hearing directly from the victims of our bombs. And I don't think we've ever had that dynamic before. Like, yeah, sometimes news organizations would kind of like put in these like fluff stories or whatever, but this was the first time where it was like un edited access to sort of an audience of people that, by the way, were speaking English, which is not their first language, because they knew that was the only way to break through. As a Palestinian my whole life, I was told that people don't see us as human, which is 100% true, and that even just me telling people I'm Palestinian was always in and of itself a political statement, even though I was just answering a question of what are you? Who are you? But when it came to the DNC in 2024, it was beginning of 2024, and as a state rep, I have access to liaisons from the White House, right? So I was emailing them like, hey, this is what I'm hearing from my constituents. Forget rest of the state for a second. Like, this is straight in my district, which is not predominantly Muslim. It's actually representative of the coalition that wins Georgia, like truly the coalition that wins Georgia, down to the percent. And I was like, if I'm hearing this from my district, I'm really, really like, I know you're not going to care about me as people, but like, can you just care about it from an electoral perspective? And um, and then also tried to do this with the campaign. And I will never forget, it was like halfway through the primary of 2024, sat down with some Biden campaign people. And I didn't even bother to ask about Gaza at that point because it was just like a moot point. But someone else did, one of my colleagues did. And their response was, we have no campaign talking points or plan on that because the White House wants to deal with that on the official side. Because during campaigns, there's an official side, like government side, and there's a campaign side. And I remember just being gobsmacked. And I was like, cool. So what is your messaging plan this year? And they're like, we are going to re-traumatize people about Trump and remind him how bad he is. I'm like, that's not going to work. You need to, yes, remind people of why Trump is bad. And also, what are you going to do differently in the last 4 years that you haven't been doing as a shift of like, to be clear, the economy and everything was, I truly think, was outside of Biden's control. And economically, he was the most leftward president we've ever had, at least in my lifetime, right? Like, those are things I can admit and I give him credit for. But I tried to point out to them, one, until he can communicate that to an audience, you can build as many highways as you want, it's not going to matter. And two, the genocide in Gaza is going to continue to be a problem. And they were not listening. And that's why Uncommitted happened, because even Harris, in her own book, kept saying that Biden was not getting the right polling, right? That he was being lied to, that they were shielding him from this. And so Uncommitted was a primary focused movement. I want to be clear. Remember, primaries are Democrats versus Democrats. General elections are Republicans versus Democrats. This was a primary to show that the polls are correct and that there is a massive, massive discontent within both the party and outside the party on this issue. Now, what they did not expect, and I know this because I was like, I know these people, they're friends of mine. None of them thought they'd get delegates. Like, they honestly thought they'd do a symbolic vote in Michigan. And then next thing you know, this exploded around the country. Like, we were calling them, be like, how can we do this in Georgia, Washington, etc. And so they didn't expect to seat delegates. I think they seated over 30 delegates, which is insane to think about for how little money they had. This was meant to be a messaging campaign. So that meant that the DNC and the Biden camp were now negotiating with Uncommitted for months before the DNC. Because I want to be clear, people keep thinking it was the week of. No. This had been ongoing for months. It was platform negotiations and it was speaker negotiations. And for months, they were sending people lists of names of potential speakers as it pertained to the DNC. Now, I was in Illinois for a completely separate panel at Rainbow Push Coalition by Every American Institute. Rest in peace, Reverend Jesse Jackson, by the way. Um, and I remember very clearly, like the panel was something like Voices You Won't Hear at the DNC, right? And I flew in on like a Monday. I was supposed to leave on Tuesday. And then my friend Abbas, bless him, who's also running in Michigan, by the way, um, he they asked him like, what are some people that y'all had recommended as speakers? And so that was the first time that my name was publicly presented as an option. And you had a bunch of members of Congress and a bunch of people latch on to me because, again, I'm a Palestinian from a swing state who is an elected official and like a known reputation. Like I just everyone kind of knew me as like a very like strategic, effective person that could communicate very well. And people were like, "Oh, they wanted 10 minutes on stage." Yo, this was like 2 minutes, not even prime time. Like I cannot begin to describe how low the bar was for this. And we kept getting calls like, working on it. I was asked to move my flight and my hotel, which for anyone who knows during convention time is a pain. And then Wednesday night, this was when we started bombing South Lebanon, when Israel started bombing South Lebanon, and this is relevant because Abbas's family is in South Lebanon. We got a call right after the family of the Israeli hostage got to speak, saying that they have decided to not have a single Palestinian speaker. And I want to be clear, not me, anybody, like any Palestinian. We offered them so many people. And that's kind of when the sit-in started and all that happened. So
Right. Yeah. And that is I think just like really an insane story. And I was familiar with many of the details there, but even rehearing it again, it just reminds me of what I think is the terminal condition of the modern Democratic Party, which is they
Hmm.
would rather lose very big in public to talk about how bad losing felt rather than win. Um,
Yeah.
and I am curious what your position on that is, because I've spoken to a lot of progressive challengers now. I've spoken to Kat Abou-Ghazaleh, I've spoken to Maurice Mitchell, the head of the Working Families Party, and the general sense I get across the board from every single person who I've spoken to who's running or who is part of the campaign infrastructure of challengers is that they are all like really pissed off about how little of a response there seems to be from national Democrats, especially now. I haven't spoken to anybody since the war in Iran started. But I am curious, like, obviously you're running on the ticket as like a Democrat, and like, do you think that there's at all a point that will come in the future where this will actually start being a liability for people who want to be taken seriously as progressives?
Oh, 100%. And it already is. And it sucks. But the reality, and this is like, I will never forget. And to be clear, some of it was bot activity because like it disappeared as soon as election was over. But the amount of people that kept telling me to run Green Party was infuriating, right? Because first off, there's like 79 registered parties in the country, for the record. The reason we have a duopoly is specifically around just you need a majority to win. And in a lot of states, Georgia being one of them, it's very difficult to get on the ballot as another party, right? So the question and the trade-off is, do we spend money just putting our name on the ballot, or do we spend money reaching voters with the policy positions that we know they really care about and can support? And that is why that tension exists. Like in New York, for example, they have different party lines. Anyone can join a party line. It's pretty easy, and anyone can like, do that, right? But in other
Yeah.
states, especially on a presidential level, it's like practically impossible. And the thing I've tried to explain to folks is like, yeah, it's become a liability. And also, this is why I've been urging people to get involved locally, because that's where you're going to find the most Democrats that believe the way that you do, right? Like when I was running for governor, and I very intentionally did this when I was running for governor, we held a press conference calling for abolishing ICE and protecting our communities. And we had specific asks for every level of government, an ask for Congress, an ask for other governors, and an ask for the legislature, right?
Mhm.
Like there are things we can do and people are doing on a local level. It's just no one hears us because news and everything else is always so focused on Congress, which is so inefficient and so ineffective right now. And my argument to those people is like, one, if that is your focus, find members of Congress that are doing it right and amplify them because that helps them build power and then forces the rest of the caucus to listen to them.
Mhm.
Two, what is happening at your like state locally? Because these local county parties, for example, if you show up and you're building their newsletter and their website or whatever, you're probably gonna end up chair in a month. I'm not like that's not an
Yeah.
exaggeration, right? Like
Yeah.
they are desperate for new people and new volunteers and new ideas. And if you bring like 10 people, you're now the majority in that county party. And
Mhm.
so, yes, it has become a liability because Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries need to go. I've said that very publicly. And but until that happens, you have Chris Van Hollen, you have Bernie Sanders, you have AOC, you have Rashida, you have Ilhan, you have um like new folks coming in, like Justin Pearson's running up in Tennessee.
Mhm.
Like, but that is never going to change until we get rid of a lot more incumbents that don't share our values.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about getting invested locally, yeah, I do want to talk about the District 7 primary. Because one of the things I thought was really insane as I was doing my research for this interview is just seeing some of the things that your opponents are saying about you. One of your opponent literally said your entry into the race was a crash out, which crazy that terminology is even entering the political discourse from like actual representatives. But then again, like Gen Z is getting older. I get it.
To be
Uh,
clear, this was not from a Gen Z
no, I
person.
no,
This
I
was
know, but
like
it's
wild.
no, I know. It's just like the fact that
Yeah.
language is even like percolating up to
Yep.
people. Um,
Yeah.
and I've also seen that like some of these people have said that like the district deserves a state senator who treats it as a priority, not a backup plan, which seems to totally just fly like in the face of your like written remarks that like you were basically pushed out by big money. So I want to actually. I don't want to litigate their framing. I think that's a
No, no, you're
stupid
good.
use
No,
of
you're good.
but I do want to give you the space to speak directly to the voters who are in District 7, like who heard that and
Yeah,
thought, oh, yeah, that's a fair point because I don't know much about Ruwa Roman.
totally.
Like, yeah, like what do you say to them then?
Yeah, so District 7 is Berkeley Lake, all of it, parts of Duluth, parts of Norcross, parts of Peachtree Corners. So that's actually my district currently. And you add on for District 7, Swanee and parts of Lawrenceville. And so I'm already representing over a third of this district. Over a third of the district are already my constituents and they already know me. And I actually took deep offense to this because, like, there's a thing that happens, I think, sometimes where people think that you can just like attack somebody in a very personal way and then you can like be buddy buddies with them afterwards. And I've actually made clear to them, I was like, I love primaries. People think I'm crazy for this, but like I remember when the conversation around my gubernatorial first started happening, and I was calling people like, what should I do? Immediately there was this push to push every candidate out of the race. And I was like, I don't want to be anointed. Like, I think that's bullshit when people just like clear the field for somebody thinking they're the best person. I think voters deserve to be wooed and I think they deserve to be competed over. That has always, like, I've said this in interviews for years. I've said this to my colleagues who get really mad at me about it because people do get mad about primaries. They get really offended. And I'm like, no, this is how we get like, that's why Republicans are so active. Their primaries are very active, their voters are very engaged. Like, I know this sounds crazy. I swear I do. And I've put this on video too. Like, I actually think primaries are really good and really healthy and really necessary. And so for them to act as if like this was like a backup plan when this was never a plan to begin with, like to be very clear. And on top of that, that my argument was like primaries are good and healthy, and if you think you're the best candidate, then by all means please run the best campaign. Like that was my thinking. And seeing them come out the way that they did in response to the news, by the way, I called them before I called anybody else. They were the first people I called. And I was like, look, I want you to know before I talk to anybody else, before I even start talking to people about endorsements and like whatever, because I want you to have the most amount of time possible to prep to like make whatever decision you want to make. But like I will not like I respect any decision you make. And I repeated what I said is that I believe in healthy primaries. I just needed to know. So when people ask me, hey, are you running against anybody? I'm not lying and saying there's no one else in the race or there's X person and it's actually Y person. And it like it makes me really sad because it just shows how much we've lost this like muscle of like competing for voters that we just think that that is the only way forward. But no, this was not a consolation prize. This was actually one of the avenues, actually the only avenue to continue the organizing work that we've done. Two of the most competitive state house races in the state sit under that district. And so if I build an apparatus of organizing, wouldn't you want that to sit on that district regardless? Like, don't you want to be able to flip those two seats? And like also to be very frank, like one of my opponents was running against somebody else, changed her mind last minute, and no one knows why. The other one just moved into the district, and we're not like sure when he actually moved, so he might not actually meet the residency requirements. And so, like, again, it's like things happen. I mean, it's messy. And I always tell people, by the way, like, never ever plan to run for a seat, especially long term, because maps get redrawn, people come out of nowhere. Like, this is why I always tell people do the work first. And then if you want to get into office, the opportunity will present itself. But yeah, it was like, it was a really, really strange, and it's been a very strange situation. But like, we've got doors to knock, phones to call. Like, if y'all want to volunteer for us, please do. And I'm going to do all that I can to earn every vote and make clear that, hey, I think I'm the best person for the job, and this is why.
You know, another thing I kind of want to talk about that I think speaks to a bigger dynamic of the Democratic Party is and correct me if I'm wrong on who this was who said this. I believe it was Esther Panich who said that you were sabotaging the party with a socialist platform. And I think that there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who view your politics as an electoral liability, right? I think that like corporate Dems like just view the entire insurgent like democratic socialist movement as just being like this almost like death knocking at the door to the party. And I'm just curious, like, how do you think about that? Like, not just tactically, but like, do you think that there is a version of the Democratic Party in Georgia that like has room for like the both you and Esther, or like, do you think that it's like evolve or die?
I mean, for context, this is someone who is pro-genocide, and I don't speak to them, even though they're my caucus. It's been 3 years, and I at this point, I'm just like, okay, you want to fight, you gotta fight. But I actually think what I think it was Summerlee that said we have to decide who we're going to serve. Are we going to serve corporations or are we going to serve people? You can't do both. And what's really funny about calling my platform socialist, and I actually like want to read it out to people because we have been running the same platform for like forever, which is nice. But like our specific platform in order was raise Georgia's minimum wage, take homes back from corporate landlords, press pause on data centers, reopen hospitals, expand healthcare access, feed hungry kids, and invest in small businesses. There was literally, and to be clear, we do have DSA chapters around the state. We don't have a statewide one. So like I'm not a DSA member. And so for like someone like that to come out and be like, this is DSA, one, she's mad because she's getting primaried by an actual DSA member. Her name is Erin Baker. She's amazing. She's a trans Jewish woman. She has been an incredible ally. But two, and also grew up in the district and has been there for over 20 years. But two, like it's so funny when they feel this like anxiety because I'm thinking like why does this bother you? Like what is it about this that's like making you feel so inadequate that you feel the need to lash out and like have a quote ready the day that I launched my campaign at 7 a.m. in the morning. Like very bizarre behavior, but also these are the winning policies. There is no way around it. If we want those crossover voters, if we want like people to switch sides, like no one sits in the economic moderate and social moderate quadrant of the whatever. No one sits there. Almost everyone sits in the economic populist, like two quadrants at the top. And we keep going to this like random, no voters live here. It's Liz Cheney. That's it. That's all who lives, and maybe Jeff Duncan. That's all we got. Like everyone else is like all over the spectrum. So, I purposely ignored her at the time. I made clear that I'm not, responding and I'm not going to do an official response, but like please show me in my platform what's so bad about our platform. And yeah, I'm happy to engage in that conversation. But this was a platform by Georgians for Georgians.
I think in terms of saying that like everybody lives in the economic populist zone of what they want out of the government right now, whether we're talking about a state government or a federal government, I personally agree with you completely. This is why when people try to just say like, oh, he's just like a silly podcaster about like Nick Fuentes being like, yeah, MAGA for Mamadani. I'm like, no, you guys don't get it. That's literally the future of American politics. If there doesn't
10%.
become a yeah, if there doesn't become
10%.
if there doesn't become an opposition party against fascism, like I'm telling you, the fascists will subsume populism and it
Yeah.
will be really bad. But
Yeah.
I want to talk about populism in terms of what I think is the most star binding populist win in the last honestly probably the last 6 years, which was Zoran Mamdani's mayoral campaign. So my understanding is that you actually traveled to New York to canvass for Zoran, and you know he won obviously, and you endorsed Lux for the Georgia House, who would be the state's first openly trans legislator. And it's clear to me that you are trying to build something that is connected not just in Georgia but across the country to like this insurgent kind of like populist of the people for the people kind of government.
Yeah.
So what I want to know is, when you look at a national map right now, what does the progressive bench actually look like to you? Like, where are you seeing models that you think are actually working? And like, where are you taking inspiration from in terms of if you were to win in District 7, like that, if you had other colleagues like you, this is what you would want to build in Georgia?
Yeah. So I feel like I always sound like such a annoying jerk when I say this, but like the principles that fueled Zoran's campaign were the principles that we flipped Georgia with, right? Like, and so it's actually really funny because sometimes it's like, are you copying Zoran? It's like, no, first off, I've known him for years. And second off, like before people knew who Zoran was, like there is a cohort of us that deeply believe in like fighting for people. I also want to say something really quickly, which is that I've noticed a lot of people being like, well, you can just do things, right? Like turns out you can just do things. Yes, you can in executive positions, right? We keep talking about Congress and legislatures and whatever, but like Zoran is an executive. He is the mayor of New York City. He can absolutely just do things. And that's why we try to do this governor thing too, because you can just do things in an executive office. And like that is I think where our bench should be going. Our bench should be going towards how do we have more executives at the city, at the county, and at the state level who are competent? Because if we get progressives into office who suck at their jobs, there's like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We're going to lose forever. That's why Republicans maintain gubernatorial seats even when their party is extremely unpopular. It's because they're strong and effective executives. I hate it. I don't like it. But like they run a good and tight ship. And Zoran is finally showing how to do that from the left. And you had other folks like the mayor of Boston. Like there have been other folks who've kind of like been on the quiet end of things. But to me personally, that's actually, I think, where we should be going. Like, as we continue to try to break the hold of big money on Congress, state and local government, I think, is where the front line is going to be for a long time. Because that to me is also one of the lowest hanging fruits to break that money on politics hold, to get good executives into power, and to keep building that out. But also, shout out to Justice Dems, who have an incredibly deep bench this year to primary people all around the country. In Congress, but then also like for us, my biggest worry right now is that a lot of funders are scared. And I'm like, guys, this is actually like this is our moment. Like I still mean it. This is a once in a generation election for Georgia. We can flip the state house, we can flip the governor's mansion, and we can flip a couple of state senate seats. And if we're not operating from that perspective, I've told people to resign and leave their jobs. I'm like, I'm not interested in your inability to have a vision. But in order for us to do that, we're gonna have to do the grunt work, and it sucks. But like the best part about it is your vote matters so much more locally anyway. Um, and also on the economic populism front, we flipped two statewide seats last year by 25 points for the Public Service Commission. And it was, I actually asked Peter Hubbard about this last night because I was having an argument with some friends over chai. And and I literally said, like, hey, how many people or how many Republicans voted for you? He said 14% of those who voted for him were Republican. And it was because of his like anti-data center, like pro lowering utility costs. Like, and again, these were two Democrats, one of them being a black woman, and like no difference in their results. So like tell me more about how we need another like corporate white dude to like save the day in Georgia when we have a blueprint that's been given to us last year.
Yeah, I actually want to talk a little bit about like the sort of fights that have to be taken in order to win. I want to actually take potentially the one person in Democratic politics who I hate the most, which is Chuck Schumer, and use one of his own lines against him, which is like some fights are worth losing. But
Hmm.
I also think that's only useful in terms of like, yeah, it's useful to lose if it like helps you win. I want to talk a little bit about like your bill record because I don't think a lot of people like know about like what you've done inside of Georgia because like I don't think if you live in Georgia there's any reason to know like about
Yeah.
your introduction of like data center moratorium, about tip worker minimum wage bills, EMS essential services pushes. Like I just want you to walk through like one of those fights, whichever one you think best illustrates how you actually
Yeah,
operate inside that building and like how you build
sure.
power. And what I really want to hear and what I think my audience wants to hear is like not just how you introduced these ideas, but also like how you actually built support for it, like who you talked to, and ultimately like what the results were.
Yeah, so let me actually start on the first bill that I was forced to fight because I didn't want this fight. It was kind of forced on me. They wanted to implement a definition of anti-Semitism that conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And it was my first year there. And what was really incredible was that I went and I talked to everybody, Republicans and Democrats. I walked them through what the bill does, what is in it, what's not in it, and like its implications. And the majority of my Democratic caucus did not vote for it. They either voted no or walked on the bill. And then it died on the Senate side. Now, it ended up passing the next year post October 7th, but like that's kind of the way that it works is like if you are able to talk to your colleagues, a lot of them don't actually know. And I know this, I promise it's not a cop out. Like genuinely, a lot of them don't actually know the intricacies of these kinds of fights. But even after October 7th, Republicans put a resolution on the floor. The caption was condemning Hamas. But like the language of the actual resolution was basically like, yay, Israel for bombing a bunch of people. Like, and I remember I had some Republicans because I was also very sick. I had the flu and I was like masked up and miserable and running a fever. And they were like, just go home. Like, you don't need to be here. And I was like, in what world do you think I'm ever going to run from a fight? Like, do I look like a coward to you? Like, one, I'm an Arab and a Southerner and a Georgian. Like it's antithetical to everything that I am. And I remember I spoke against the resolution. I talked about all the people that had lost loved ones. And because in it, it also said, like, we stand with the Jewish community. I was like, resolutions are bullshit. They're basically fancy press releases. So, like, if you agree with me, like, walk out with me. And I kid you not, I think almost 80 people walked out with me on that resolution and, like, refused to vote for it. They were like, yeah, this is like BS. We're not doing this. But that's how I've always operated in deep coalition, and I always give people a chance to do the right thing every single time, which is why or how I would say EMS is not emergency medical services. Ambulances are not considered essential service, unlike law enforcement and fire. Most people don't realize this. And so 15 other states had designated an essential service. I'm a freshman Democrat in the minority party, and everyone kept telling me there's no point trying to pass a bill. Well, as a freshman, I passed the bill out of the House. It got all the way to rules in the Senate, which is like the second to last stop, but we just ran out of time because session ended. And this year, people were like, "Well, just give it to a Republican. He'll do it better than you. He's already messed it up." And so like that to me is how it goes, right? You have to learn to talk to people, even people different than you, because that's how I met. Like that's how I found out there were several Republicans that used to be EMTs back in the day. They co-sponsored my legislation. Most of my legislation is bipartisan. Even the data center moratorium, like we knew it was going to go anywhere. However, seven other states then introduced their own versions of this, including a Republican running for governor. And so, like, oftentimes being in the minority, yeah, you lose a lot, but there is, and this is what I've tried to make the argument to other Democrats is like introduce the bill anyway. Have the conversation anyway, because then you can perfect it. And if we do get into power, we're ready to go on day one. And you don't know what it's going to inspire around the country as well that can actually go a long way. And so that's how I've always operated. Like, just try. Like, that's been my most basic principle being here.
In our last little bit of time together, I actually want you to take your time with this question, which is in terms of just trying. just have vision, just fight. Well, I want you to make it like tangible. Like I want you to describe like two versions of Gwinnett County to me, if you can. Like a kid is born today. A kid's going to be born today in Gwinnett County, and 10 years from now, they'll be 10 years old. And so I want you to say like, in one version, the kind of politics that you're fighting for has taken hold, not just for your seat, but for Georgia, like for the movement you're describing. And in the other, it just doesn't. Like we keep going where we're going. What does that kid's life actually look like in the version where like your version of politics wins? Like what like tangibly, what does it feel like for that kid?
Yeah. Right now, we rank one of the lowest in terms of healthcare, especially maternal mortality. We have one of the highest rates in the country. Not only that, but we have one of the worst literacy rates in the country. But we have a playbook that Mississippi gave us, right, that we could implement. And thankfully, we did pass some legislation on that. So, like, there's two doors that Georgia can go down. There's the door of this continuation of selling our state for parts and not even to the highest bidder. And then there's a door where we actually invest to solve the problems of our present while actually making investments in our future. And that's one where we finally expand public transit in Gwinnett because traffic sucks. It's one where we've implemented a better literacy program. So that kid, if they have dyslexia or they can't read, we don't find out until they're like 8 or 9 years old. We actually, in the world that I envision, we find out very early, do the assessments early, and actually make sure that kid has the best chance to thrive. It's one where we close the school to prison pipeline because right now only 2% of those in jail have a college degree in Georgia. And yet we have one of the largest private prison systems. And I'd rather be using that money to educate those kids and find them better jobs. It's also one where we protect their jobs from like AI and like from robots taking over. Because honest to God, like that's the thing that keeps me up at night. It's like if robots are the ones doing the art and the music and the fun stuff while we have to do the grunt work, then what kind of world is that we're living in? Like, what is the point at that point? And so it's one where we're like investing in people and not just shareholders. It's one where like a kid is going to the best school possible because we do have some schools like that aren't as good as others in Gwinnett County, but also across Georgia. It's one where you can vote with ease and not be like prevented at every chance possible. Um, and frankly, it's one where we can rank number one in healthcare, number one in education, like number one in research instead of number one place to do business, but really it's corporations. And also if you're a small business, like screw you too. Like I really do think because we have one of the youngest populations in the country, median age is 37 years old, that like truly we are at that like which way do we go? And I really, really want to go down this other way.
Before we sign out here, I want to give you one last chance to plug anything specific in your campaign. If there's any important
Yeah.
dates that are coming up, if there's any calls to action for the people who are listening to this who might live in Gwinnett County or live in surrounding counties, might want to come help you. Just anything that you want.
Thanks. All right, so if you live in Georgia, I need you to mark down these dates. So April 20th is the last day to register to vote for the primaries. April 27th is when early voting starts, and then May 19th is the actual primary. Now, between now and then, we're going to be posting our weekly schedule of where we're going to be. We're canvassing every weekend. We're doing phone banks weeknights, and y'all can find all of that at ruwaforgeorgia.com. It's all spelled out, RUWAFORGEORGIA.com. And there's a pledge because you can't donate to me right now. I'm in session, but you can make a pledge to donate. You can sign up to volunteer. But honestly, anywhere that you are in Georgia, we are going to continue looking for good candidates that like share our platform and want you to support them too, right? I'm a deep believer that rising tides raise all ships. And so as we continue to build this infrastructure, like a lot of people are like, I'm so sad I don't get to vote for someone I really want to vote for. I'm like, all right, my commitment to you is to help you find that person in your area, or you could become that person. And so the work is going to look different statewide, but it's still going to be get done. And for our district, like I'm going to fight like hell because I think that voters deserve the best option possible, and we're going to keep building our movement.
Romman, everyone, thank you so much, Representative Romman.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.